The year is 2077. I've been sent back in time, reprogrammed to protect Sean Connor from Skynet's robot assassins. All is well. All is peaceful. Until Judgment Day.
Take off your clothes.
Confirmed reports, I repeat, confirmed reports of nuclear detonations in New York and Pennsylvania.
Get to the chopper. Hazardous radiation levels detected.
Can you beat Fallout 4 as the Terminator? So before we get too far into this is more of a playthrough than it is a challenge. I mean, let's be real here. It's not much of a challenge to beat anything as the Terminator. Have you seen this guy? He was the governor of California, but that doesn't mean it was smooth sailing the entire way. As far as rules go, I didn't impose many special restrictions on myself this time. Pretty much the only thing I have to do is wear the leather jacket and sunglasses. I was going to implement rules on weapon use, but considering the Terminator would and does use whatever he can to get the job done, it didn't make much sense to give myself restrictions. Still, I only used about 3 weapons for the majority of the run. The lever-action shotgun, a .45 pistol, and a minigun. In addition, the only way I could heal is through stim packs, since I'm pretty sure robots don't eat or drink, and I'm fairly certain they don't use chems either. Now, you might be wondering, since I didn't show you my special allocation, what that looks like. Well, I went into the console commands and set everything to 10. Bridle your rage. Remember, this is the Terminator as played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. A 10 is just being realistic. I think the only special stat I didn't need to have at 10 was charisma, but if you think about it, having a high charisma doesn't necessarily mean you're a likable person, it just means you can get what you want. That's really all there is to it. The icing on the cake is this mod I've installed that replaces all of the Soul Survivors' vanilla dialogue with various movie quotes by former California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger himself, and I'll be including lots because they're hilarious. It's also set to very hard. Now let's cut to the chase. Ready? Let's go. Right out of the vault, I make a beeline for Sean Connor's house to collect what I left behind, my lever-action shotgun. With that in hand, I had a quick conversation with a robot of considerably lesser intellect, and it pointed me to somebody in Concord who could help me on my mission. When I arrived, the place was overrun with raiders, and even though all of my special stats were maxed out, I still died. It's really hard to claim the benefits of maxed out specials when you're dead. It took a few tries, but I was able to put all of the raiders in their place and made my way into the Museum of Freedom. More raiders to deal with, and since I was out of shotgun ammo, I switched to the 10mm pistol. Combat wouldn't stop being a pain in the rear until I got access to ballistic weave from the railroad's questline, so for now, each and every fight was a lot less fun than I'd hoped it would be. When I made it to the top, I was greeted by the remains of the Minutemen, and I think this is one of my favorite lines that I got to say throughout the whole game.
I'm a cybernetic organism, living tissue over a metal endoskeleton.
We brainstormed a plan, and before I knew it, I was on the roof, ripping a minigun off the vertibird with my bare hands, because that's something you can do with a strength of at least 8. Pro-life tip. I left the power armor behind because I'm the Terminator, though I did have to take a more circuitous route to get off the roof. But once I was on the ground level, the fun began. Right now, the minigun's actually an excellent weapon. Sadly, I only got to use it a few times in the run, mainly because its ammo doesn't start to spawn until you hit higher levels. And let's be honest, at that point in the game, the minigun kinda sucks. I still had quite a bit of fun with it though. Now, I really wanted to look cool while I was killing the Deathclaw, but it one-shots me, so I did have to cheese this fight just a little. But don't worry, there are plenty more Deathclaws where that came from. Also, if you haven't noticed by now, I'm running this entire challenge in third-person mode. I don't know why, I just thought it'd fit the playstyle better. After that, I made it back to Sanctuary and set about upgrading my lever-action shotgun. I didn't actually have all of the material, but it gave me an idea of what I'd need down the road. Now usually, I'm quite willing to help the Minutemen for a while to get some easy levels, but this time, I have a mission. Find Sean Connor and keep him alive. So it's straight to Diamond City. That is until I run into Wolfgang, and I'm just gonna let this whole conversation play out for you because it is by far one of the funniest things that happened in this challenge.
I need your clothes, your chems, and your bottle caps.
Just keep calm, all right? Here.
Get out.
You gotta be kidding me.
After I stole that man's clothing, I sprinted the rest of the way to Diamond City, and considering all of my stats are maxed out, my AP bar lasted a very long time. When I arrived, I did have to listen to the whole entire Piper conversation, though once I was inside, I was able to stop by the local gun dealer and pick up the .45 Auto. This weapon right here is God tier, and you'll see why in a bit. Meanwhile, my sensors picked up a nearby detective agency. I figured a private eye would be my best bet to find Sean Connor. But before I got the chance to visit, I overheard a very important piece of information. It was something about the railroad, so I stopped to listen and calculate what my next move would be. I decided ballistic weave was a little more important at the time, and so I ran off to follow the Freedom Trail wherever it led. The 45 auto made the walk through downtown Boston much easier. When I landed at Park Street Station and took one look at that circle with its red line coming out of it, my advanced AI brain immediately deduced with its advanced AI logic that this sign was pointing me to the Old North Church. And would you look at that, it wasn't too far away. The ghouls in the interior really didn't stand much of a chance against my shotgun. I used mountains of ultra-advanced algorithmic data to decode the spinning wheel puzzle, and soon enough I was face to face with Desdemona and the rest of the railroad's high command. We exchanged some hilarious dialogue, then I was paired up with Deacon to go reclaim Dr. Carrington's prototype. He waited patiently while I stopped at Sanctuary to upgrade my 45 auto, then we set off on our task. Killing the ghouls up on the highway was the easy part. The hard part wasn't until we were in the sewer getting ready to enter the Slocum Joes. You see, aside from the railroad being thematically and topically appropriate for a Terminator storyline, really, the main reason I'm working with them is to get Ballistic Weave. I'm fairly certain I would not have been able to beat the challenge without it. Inside, I found myself fighting against my fellow Terminators, who did more than enough damage, and I was very much out of stim packs. To say the least, I didn't really play this part like the Terminator. It was a lot more hiding and letting Deacon do the work, though that didn't stop me from getting my fair share of kills. Eventually, I happened across a couple of stimpaks, which made the last part that much easier. And with Carrington's prototype in hand, Deacon gave me the Deliverer, and I was very tempted to make this gun one of my more used weapons, though I would ultimately decide against it. After that, I returned to Desdemona at the Railroad HQ and was welcomed with open arms. Now that I'd cemented myself as a member of the Railroad, my first task was to help Stockton move a Terminator to a safer place. I also stopped back at Diamond City and had this lovely conversation with Myrna. Back out in the wastes, I made a pit stop at Eleanor, an unmarked trader who sells some high-grade ammunition. Now fortified, I made the long trek to find the dead drop with Stockton's holotape. That took me straight to nearby Bunker Hill. I met with Stockton, talked as covertly as possible, and made my way to the rendezvous to start our exfiltration mission. Not gonna lie, I expected this part to be a lot harder than it was. The only problem I faced was when High Rise was cowering by this tree and wouldn't move so we could continue the quest. Once H2 was safe, I returned to HQ and talked with Pam. She wanted me to set up a new safe house for the railroad at Starlight Drive-In, so I complied. Clearing the place wasn't too bad, but I did have to do a little bit of searching for parts so I could make the turrets. Back to Pam, and she already had another quest lined up. Find a particular Black Ops cache. This was exactly what I needed. Now, I assumed finding the cache would involve me having to walk through a massive area while taking heavy fire, but turns out, it was as easy as opening a singular door, killing a few gunners, and opening the box. With the DIA cache in hand, I returned to Pam, got rewarded, stopped to talk to Tinker Tom, and he informed me that he had some armor for sale with Ballistic Weave. This means I can now make my own Ballistic Weave armor, so that's just what I did. Afterwards, I wandered around the wasteland looking for Lucas Miller, of course because he's one of the only people who sells ballistic fiber. Once I had everything in order, I went over to the armor bench and was able to Ballistic Weave Mark II my jacket and jeans. This is already such an immediate step up from what I had. By the way, if you're wondering why I haven't talked about any of my levels up to this point, it's because I don't think there's much of a need to talk about leveling in Fallout 4, especially in the early game. Most of your perk points will go into making your weapons do more damage, and even that didn't change much. Now that I was decked out and had to tow Ballistic Weave, I deduced that the railroad was no longer vital to my mission objective, so I made my way back to Diamond City to talk to that aforementioned private eye, Nick Valentine. What my sensors did not pick up was that Mr. Valentine was not here, and was in fact trapped in a vault full of wannabe gangsters. Just my luck. This would have been a lot harder if my armor wasn't ballistic weaved, though I'm not saying it was a walk in the park. At least killing all of these triggermen gave me a lot of 45 ammo. The actual vault wasn't much different. That was until I came upon my boy Dino over here, guarding a one Mr. Nick Valentine. I took a couple of shots at him, booked it up the stairs, and finished him off with the lever action. And since you've no doubt noticed it, due to the mod that makes the synths look like Terminators, yeah, Nick looks really creepy. From here, the rest of the vault was a cakewalk. We made it to Skinny Malone, and I convinced Starla to leave him because I just didn't really feel like fighting. Up top, I conversed with Nick and was told to meet him in Diamond City when I was ready to find Sean Connor. Now, I should have immediately gone back to Diamond City, but I felt it's been a while since I've used the minigun, so I spent a hot minute getting the components together so I could make some ammo of my own. Sometime later, I still didn't have as much ammo as I'd like, so I set my sights on USF Satellite Station Olivia, as there's a raider inside called Ak who wields a minigun. Also, when I opened this door, there was a gigantic legendary radroach waiting for me inside. Ugh, gross. With my newly reloaded minigun in hand, I wandered around the waste for a bit and settled on clearing the super duper mart of ghouls, just to have a little fun. And since it was pretty close by, I also cleared the Corvega assembly plant of raiders too. Back at Sanctuary, I upgraded my 45 auto with an advanced receiver which now made it do a stellar 80 damage. From here I would have gone to Diamond City so I could continue the search for Sean Connor, but I wanted to pack on a few more levels first, so I decided to help out the Minutemen. They sent me to Grey Garden to fix their drinking problem, so from there it was off to the nearby water treatment plant that just so happened to be both guarded by super mutants and infested with Mirelurks. Of course, they were more of a nuisance than anything. Back at Sanctuary, but before I talked to Preston, I took Sturgis' quest to fix the place up a bit. Now with everything in tip-top shape, I reported back to Preston and he told me to check in at County Crossing. At this point in the playthrough, I was finally starting to feel like the Terminator. I could charge into virtually any situation and walk out with most of my health and a pile of dead raiders. This makes clearing places like Revere Beach Station a breeze. Back to Preston with the good news that another settlement was on our side, and it was time to take the castle back from, I don't know, I wasn't paying attention. I had a solid amount of ammunition, so I figured the castle was going to be pretty easy to deal with. I wasn't too far off the mark either. The Mirelurks posed more of a challenge than raiders would, but mainly because of their hard exoskeletons. But the 45 pistol and the lever-action shotgun were more than enough to take them down. The real problem here, as everyone probably knows, was the Mirelurk Queen. At first I tried to dispatch her with my minigun, but as I said earlier in the challenge, the minigun is not a very good weapon later on. What I ended up doing was sitting in the corner, whittling her health away from afar with the 45 auto. I thought I'd be pretty well out of her attack range, but she shoots this weird goop that does tremendous health damage, even through my armor. It took a fair amount of tries to get this right, but when I did, I felt I could officially call myself the Terminator. With the castle back in somewhat working order, now seemed as good a time as ever to return to Diamond City and talk to Nick Valentine about finding Sean Connor. I thought there'd be some funny moments in this conversation, but there wasn't anything to write home about. I did learn that the man most likely behind kidnapping Sean Connor was Kellogg, a mercenary who had previously been living in Diamond City. Of course, Kellogg's old house was locked up tight, and I had to talk to the mayor of Diamond City about getting a key for it. Thankfully, he obliged. Inside, Nick and I looked for clues pertaining to Kellogg's whereabouts. We found his secret room and were able to deduce that he enjoyed San Francisco Sunlight cigars. Using Dogmeat's stellar sniffer, we were able to track Kellogg, but first I decided to head back to Sanctuary and once again upgrade the ballistic weave on my leather jacket. We've all done the walk to Fort Hagen before, so I won't bore any of you by talking about it. Once inside, I was ambushed by more Terminators, probably here to protect Kellogg from me. They were nothing more than mere bullet fodder. I made my way into the lower depths. It was time to ask Kellogg a bunch of questions. Questions I'd need answers to immediately. I'll just let this conversation play out for you.
You're funny. That's why I'm going to kill you last. You are one ugly motherfucker. Remember when I said I'd kill you last? I lied.
Attack.
So, we were no closer to finding Sean Connor, but at least Kellogg was dead. I was able to scavenge some cybernetic components from his brain, which leads me to believe he was trying to become a Terminator as well. Sadly, his model will never make it into production. Back outside, I was greeted by the Brotherhood of Steel airship known as the Prydwen. I deduced that helping them would lead me to Sean Connor because Bethesda story logic dictates that anyone with cool armor is vitally important to your primary objective. Before I dove headlong into the Brotherhood of Steel questline, I returned to Nick Valentine to discuss my findings with him and Piper. With Kellogg a dead end, pun intended, there wasn't much else we could do, except to take his cybernetic augmentations to Dr. Amari and Goodneighbor. With luck, she'd be able to help us crack the code to get into the hub of Skynet's Terminator production, known as the Institute. It's actually really funny, because when I arrived in Goodneighbor, I saw Wolfgang naked as ever. Then it was straight to Dr. Amari after this, no messing around. Sean Connor was close, I could tell. Dr. Amari talked Nick and I into memory loungers, and we dove into the late breakfast cereal's head. I actually kind of broke this part as I was playing in third person, which I'm fairly certain you're not supposed to be able to do inside of the memory den. If you look real close, you can see my invisible character model wandering around. It just works. Alas, I am not going to bore you with unnecessary Kellogg memories, because the only one that's of importance is the final one, showing us that Skynet's Institute uses teleportation to release its Terminators upon the Commonwealth, and that an Institute scientist known as Virgil was located in the glowing sea, and he'd be most likely to help us infiltrate it. With this knowledge in hand, I booked it towards the glowing sea. At this point, I didn't even know if Sean Connor was still alive, so I had to work fast. I was not surprised when I stumbled across 2 Deathclaws. Thankfully, the 45 pistol is absolutely busted, and they went down without a lick of trouble. The Rat Scorpions, on the other hand, they coordinated, flanking me, and this encounter ended up being a lot harder than it needed to be. The final hurdle was right in front of Virgil's cave, where another Deathclaw was waiting, and it actually managed to kill me. Inside, Virgil was quite surprised that I managed to find him, and was even more skeptical once he heard my reason for finding him. though in the end, he did agree to help me find an Institute courser whose chip I would need to get inside of the Institute. While I was off collecting that, Virgil would be making schematics for the molecular array. He pointed me to the CIT ruins where I began my hunt. After a quick scan of the area, I was able to pinpoint the courser's location to Green Tech Genetics. The gunners here did plenty of damage, thankfully not as much damage as I did. It wasn't too long before I made it to the top and had a lovely conversation with the courser. Since he wasn't willing to give me his clothes, chems, and caps, I had no choice but to kill him. With the chip in hand, I made my way to somebody who could decode it. That somebody was the Railroad, specifically Tinker Tom. Once I had the data I needed, it was just a quick trip back to Virgil for the molecular array schematics, and then one last stop to the Railroad so they could help me build it. I had most of the materials I needed to build the whole thing right now, and any extras I needed to grab were thankfully not in any dangerous places. This was it, the nexus of Skynet's influence. Inside the Institute, I would find Sean Connor and complete my mission. I stepped on the platform and was beamed away. After a short walk, I spotted a boy, roughly 10, and my sensors indicated this was indeed Sean Connor. All of a sudden, a man came through the door. My sensors indicated this was also Sean Connor. Convinced this had to be an error, I ran a whole scan on the building. 90% of the people in here were Sean Connor. Skynet put a little of Sean Connor into every one of these Terminators. This did not bode well for me. I was sent to protect the original Sean Connor. I couldn't protect hundreds of them. I had to choose the right one. Since the boy was closest in age, I determined he must be the real Sean Connor. But now, there was a new prime directive. I must eliminate all of the other Sean Connors, for too many could have a severe impact on the future. So with that, it was time to live up to my namesake and terminate. To tell you the truth, I expected this to be a whole hell of a lot easier than it was. But Todd Howard really doesn't want you killing off the Institute this early. So much so that I was eventually backed into a corner with no stim packs. I gave it the old college try, and I definitely could have killed the majority of them, but it wouldn't have felt very Terminator of me to do it this way. So I did the sensible thing. I went back in time. How, you may ask? Well, there's this little button on the Pip-Boy. You don't think they'd send me into the future without a way to get back, would you? Even though they totally probably would. Actually, don't think about it too much. Back in a more stable timeline, I knew I was going to need more power if I had any chance of taking the Institute down, so I did what any self-respecting killer robot would do. I joined the Brotherhood of Steel. Now, while it is true the Brotherhood of Steel isn't fond of robots that have free will, they didn't really seem to mind me for some reason. Maybe it's because my sensors indicated that Paladin Dance was also a Terminator, but I could be wrong. Once I linked up with Dance, he wanted my help clearing ArcJet so we could get the deep-range transmitter. I'm honestly kinda surprised that they still make you do this quest even though the Pridwin is already here, but I guess they didn't have any better quests set up. Taking out the Terminators that held ArcJet was fairly easy at this point, and for once, instead of burning Paladin Dance to a crisp, I actually helped him fight off the robot onslaught. With the deep-range transmitter in hand, I was invited to join the Brotherhood and accepted, knowing they had the power to bring the Institute down. Now, I could have immediately gone to the Pridwin with Paladin Dance, but I instead decided to do Reese and Halen's quests so I could get some experience. Both quests were boring and easy, so that took no time. I was now level 22, and this is a good time to take a peek at the perks I've been working on. Like I said, most of them were damage-related. I returned to the police station and climbed aboard a vertibird with Paladin Dance, where I took up my pent-up robot aggression out in some cars below. Once we were on the Pridwin, Dance was sent away by Captain Kells, and then I literally told him this line.
I'm a cybernetic organism, living tissue over a metal endoskeleton.
And they really didn't seem to mind, which is making me think the Brotherhood might not be all it's cracked up to be. I listened to Elder Maxon's speech, and after that, mingled with the rest of the crew. Nothing more than a little walking around, informing more people that I am a cybernetic organism, and my mission is to protect you, and making sure to tell the doctor that it is, indeed, not a tumor. With the crew sufficiently charmed, I could now buy from Proctor Tegan, who thankfully sold high amounts of 5mm ammo for my minigun. Back to Elder Maxon for my quest, and I was tasked with retrieving an arsenal of mini-nukes from Fort Strong. I was really looking forward to this quest because it's one of the few times in a Fallout 4 challenge that I can actually use the minigun attached to the vertibird, which makes fighting the behemoth no big deal. Once I was back down on ground level though, I was surprised at just how strong the super mutants are. It's probably because I'm a much higher level than I'd normally be at this part in the game, which is a good thing and a bad thing. There were 2 legendary super mutant butchers inside of Fort Strong, both of which didn't actually give me anything usable, but it sure did make for a hell of a fight. In the lower area, the mutants were much easier, and before I knew it, I was talking with Paladin Dance to finish the quest. Sadly, for the time being, I couldn't do any more of the main Brotherhood quests until I went to the Institute. I could still do Reese's and Halen's quests, which was good as I wanted some extra experience, but if I really wanted to get any further in the story, I knew what I had to do first. At this point, I felt more than ready to go to the Institute and take the rest of my fellow Terminators down, but I stopped and took the time to clear Saugus Ironworks. I don't know why, but I felt deep in my circuits that for certain, this place would be important eventually. Still seeking a bit more power before I confronted the Shawn army, I returned to the castle to talk to Ronnie Shaw about getting the artillery back up and running. Not much of note here, the only challenge I faced was Sarge the Sentry Bot. By the way, fighting Sentry Bots in close quarters is not fun. With the artillery set up and thoroughly tested, I returned to Preston with the good news and leveled up to 25. I think this is the highest level I've ever gotten in a Fallout 4 challenge. Don't quote me on that though. To make certain I was absolutely ready to destroy the Institute, I stopped at as many traders as I could to buy ammunition. Once I was prepared, I went to Mercer's safe house to gird my loins. This time, I wasn't messing around, and I brought plenty of stimpaks and 5mm ammo for the minigun. Even with all that, and 3 ranks of the heavy gunner perk, this was still surprisingly difficult. Like, they really don't want you killing everyone here, that is for damn certain. Of course, that's never stopped me before, except for the one time earlier, and after about 10 minutes of fighting, I cleared the majority of the Institute members from the area. I made sure to go through all of the optional areas to clear out any sneaky remnants, and I eventually stumbled upon this room, which for some reason I'd never seen before until I did this challenge. And I'll tell you what, it makes me hate the Institute even more. Once I was certain I had the majority of the people here taken care of, I rode the elevator back up top, and oh boy, I was in for a surprise. There were so many Terminators up here, and I was running out of ammo. Not to mention, they weren't just normal Terminators, they were high-level Terminators, making this even more impossible. I'm talking like 30 to 40 at least. Thankfully, I didn't actually need to go up here, so I decided to leave them to their own devices for now, and I'd finished the job when I came back. Going to the lower level, however, posed the exact same problem, if not worse, because now instead of being almost out of ammo, I was pretty much completely out of ammo. And while I did make a huge dent in them, it wasn't nearly enough. So I did what any self-respecting killer robot would do. Once again, I went back to the past. This time, however, knowing that I stood no chance of taking the whole Institute down by myself, I opted to let them live for the moment. When I returned to the railroad with the bad news that I was permanently banned from entering the Institute, I could no longer side with them, though they weren't mad at me for some reason. This left me with one last choice, and I'm quite glad I did the bulk of their quest prior to this, the Minutemen. While not as dangerous as the Brotherhood of Steel, they'd suffice. I did have to take some time to build them up a bit more before we could start planning, but I was okay with that, and even got to kill a legendary Deathclaw, which I haven't seen for a long time in this game. Goes to show how much I play it, I suppose. After the Minutemen were built up to a sizable amount, I returned to Preston and learned the Institute planned to launch a counterattack against us at the castle. I got there as quickly as I could, and set up whatever counter defenses I could muster. Thankfully, since I didn't shoot up the Institute in this timeline, I had a lot of ammo for this part, which was so desperately needed. Not only were they sending T-800s after me, they were sending T-1000s, and this went on for a very long time, to the point where I did run out of ammo and had to use this legendary super sledge I acquired throughout my travels. But in the end, we did it. We staved off the Institute attack, and it was time to bring the battle to them. After I stocked back up on ammo and supplies, of course. What we once thought to be impossible without the molecular array was made simple after Sturgis told us there was an intake pipe right outside of the CIT ruins that led straight to the Institute. Advice for any aspiring supervillains, maybe don't have a handy path that leads directly to the center of your secret base. Capitalizing on this information, I made my way there as fast as I could, ready to get Shawn Connor back and finish this mission for good. I encountered nothing too terribly dangerous while I was crawling through the pipes, and before I knew it, I was back at the relay station. I uploaded the targeting sequence I needed to bring the Minutemen to me, and we were as ready as we'll ever be. This is when the fighting got hectic, but thankfully the Terminators were much more spread out than when I tried it the first couple of times, which helped a lot. Before I knew it, I was killing synthetic gorillas and legendary Terminator patrollers. With the help of Preston Garvey and his flamer for some reason, clearing the central area of the Institute was incredibly easy, and considering my lever-action shotgun does nearly 200 damage per shot, there wasn't much that was capable of standing in my way. The way forward was locked, and I had to make my way up to the director's office where I came face to face with older Shawn Connor, who was dying. Once our conversation was done, I saw no need to keep him alive, and I opened up the locked door so I could make my way to the reactor. I really thought the reactor room was going to be a major challenge, but at this point I was almost level 30 and I was pretty much a god amongst men. Nothing stood in my way, not even the legendaries. And before I knew it, I was attaching the pulse charge to the reactor and teleporting back to the relay. I finally think the Institute figured out why I was here, for when I arrived, I was greeted by none other than Shawn Connor. With my mission now complete, we could use the relay to leave the Institute and finish off what remained of the other Shawn Connors. The future was saved. Shawn Connor would now be safely guarded by the Minutemen for the rest of his life. meaning my existence was no longer compulsory. And to make sure nothing like this ever happened again, I had to say farewell. And I beat Fallout 4 as the Terminator. I cannot state how much fun I had doing this playthrough. I'll make sure to leave the mods that I used in the description so you can try it yourself, because this is definitely worth it. It was honestly so fun that I am tempted to go back in and continue playing the file in my spare time. If you enjoyed today's video, which I really hope you did, consider leaving a like, a comment, and subscribing. It helps me out a lot. Also, check out the Discord and Patreon. I'll have links to both below. Special thanks to my patrons Braden Watson, Riley Anderson, Dr. Maritimus, and Anonymous. Y'all are the best. Thanks to 6 weirdly nostalgic rats in a trench coat for helping me write this script. If you haven't seen Terminator 1 or 2, do it for them. You'll love it. And until next time, stay safe out there, and peace out.